Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the MORPC-Attributable Funds workshop. We do have people monitoring the chat, so someone online, let us know. Make sure you can hear us all right.
We can hear you.
Thank you. So I'm going to kick us off here. I'm Nick Gill. I'm the Transportation Director here at MORPC. Oversees all of our metropolitan planning organization responsibilities, which one of is allocating our federal transportation dollars that's attributable to us. So we have control over 2 projects within the MPO area. I'll be starting us off here with that, and then I'll be kicking it over to other members of the team to go on with the details. So once again, welcome. Thank you for the people that came here in person. You get the benefit of having cookies in the back of the room, and so just get up and get those. Those that the 30 some or so that's online now, missed out on the cookies, but you'll get all the same information. We are recording this, and we will post the recording, after we're done here the next day or two for anyone who missed it and wants to go to our website and be able to see the recording. So today we'll give you a quick introduction about our attributable funds process, and then go into what the different programs are and eligibility requirements, our application process, and then how we go through our evaluation and scoring and selection. And then if you are selected to receive funding, what the ongoing requirements as you work through the process to develop your project and take it to construction. So it's all guided by the policies for managing MORPC-Attributable funds. That's on our website. All the details are in there, and hopefully it's the answer to all your questions. But if not, Tom Graham will lead this activity for us, and he's available along with Shelby Olderoyd to answer questions and help you through the entire process. So the document sort of outlines the steps, what this is all about, how the Attributable Funds Committee is made up, and how they actually oversee the process the staff goes through to administer the attributable funds, all the eligibility requirements, all the different activity categories that Tom will get into later, and all the process applications, the details on the evaluation, so forth. It's on our website, and it's a process we go through every 2 years to update that and make it ready for this application cycle. In big picture, we have about $48 million that we receive every year across 4 different federal transportation programs. The Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program, the Transportation Alternatives Program, and the Carbon Reduction Program. So that's what we receive every 2 years. We solicit applications every year. We solicit applications every 2 years and looking for funding several years in advance because it takes time to get the projects through the project development process. And then those that have outstanding commitments, you've probably already been notified with those emails from Tom on which one needs to submit updates. If you haven't, you will be receiving them very shortly, and all those information is already preloaded into the application as well for you to just look at those, review, make any updates. Want to make it as simple and as easy as possible for the updates as well as the new commitments we go through. The Attributable Funds Committee, as I mentioned earlier, it oversees this entire process. It includes all the members of the Transportation Advisory Committee, some other special interests that are part of that process as well as members of our Community Advisory Committee, our Transportation Policy Committee, and Sustainability Advisory Committee, and then any local community who has an outstanding commitment of funding to us or applied for funding in last round is part of the process, and they were all part of the process to review the policies that was just adopted earlier this month and to make the updates as we move into this round. Like I said, they will oversee our staff's application of the policies to the project applications, the scoring, discussion, and ultimately the recommendation of projects to receive our funding. We began this process with a review of the policies that the AFC oversaw with staff. Started in the fall. Had a brainstorm session to see, just sort of coming off of the last cycle, what needed to change, what adjustments needed to make. We had meetings through the last 3 months of the year to make and recommend changes. With that, we had a public comment period the first part of 2024. As I mentioned, we just adopted it earlier this month to be the policies, and thus are now ready to open the application cycle for this round. Some of the changes 2024, really relatively minor changes overall. At the same time as updating the attributable funds policy, we also update our complete streets policy, which applies to any projects receiving MORPC attributable funds. So those were done in conjunction with each other. So there's updates in the attributable funds policy related to profit references to that. There was some changes with regard to the travel delay reduction as one of the economic goal measures. There was also some modifications to kind of the scoring, sort of clarification of the scoring of what percentage and amount of MORPC funding you requested relative to the total project cost. And a further emphasis, again, for the second cycle in a row, of further emphasizing safety as a more and more important component of selecting a project for funding. Like I said, it is a 2-year cycle. We're in a process where we started the review process, sort of starts the process. We did that fall. We adopted policies, and we're in this corner of the circle there of opening the application and beginning the application process. The timeline for this round shown here. Email just went out today that attributable funds application online application portal is now open and able to be used. Those commitments we talked about that need updates, they're due on July 12th. This initial screening application process for new funding commitments will be on July 19th. So you need to meet that July 19th deadline if you want a new funding commitment. It's minimal information. It's just sort of a screening process. I think Tom gets in a little more detail later on exactly what's in there. And later in July and mid-August, we complete a review of the screening application, provide some initial feedback on the screening application, and any direction and guidance on the final application that is due on October 2nd. And then we meet basically through the fall and into the first part of December with the Attributable Funds Committee to review the applications, review our scoring up the applications, and make recommendations for a public comment period that would be in the first part of 25 with the ultimate adoption of our updated previous commitments and new funding commitments in March of 2025. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom now for the next piece of this. And once again, I'm going to have to leave here in a little bit, but I want to just, again, thank you for joining us, and hope this is helpful in guiding and understanding our process. And if there's any questions, we're very available to reach out to any of the folks that contact information that Tom will have here at the end, and to reach out to help you get through this process. It is a bit daunting looking process, but we want to try to make it as simple and as easy for you to help fill out that information as you can. Any way we can help do that, that's what we want to do. So thank you. Tom?
All right, good afternoon, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Tom Graham. I'm a principal planner here at MORPC, working primarily on our short-range planning and implementation efforts, including the MORPC-Attributable Funds Program. So I'm going to go ahead and get into some of the different funding programs and eligibility components that will be impacting what projects you should be looking at for potential applications. So to start, we have a variety of eligible activities. Projects working on roads and bridges, that could be reconstruction, minor widenings, major widenings, road diets. They're all eligible. Just to be noted, roads are only eligible when they are on the federal aid system. I know that is on another slide after this, but just want to point that out. Bridges are eligible whether or not they are on the federal aid system. And then we also can allocate funding to transit projects as well as the construction of standalone bicycle and pedestrian facilities. That last note there, pretty much all of our commitments are primarily for capital and not operating expenses. To get into more of the detail, only public agencies are eligible to apply for MORPC-Attributable funds. Again, as I just mentioned, those roadways are required to be on the federal aid system, but bridges can be on any roadway. Very importantly, the projects that apply for MORPC-Attributable funds must be included in the 2024 to 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. This MTP was just adopted earlier this month, and that project listing is available on our website. Now, projects can either be individually listed and identified in the MTP, but there are also a variety of project types included in the MTP via line item. So reconstruction or maintenance projects, as well as a variety of different transit projects, can all sort of fall under those line items. So even if they're not individually listed, there's still the potential for the projects to be eligible, namely intersection improvements as well. We have a line item for those. So if you're unsure if the project is eligible based on its inclusion in the MTP, please reach out to myself or Shelby or any of the other staff here at MORPC. Lauren? Yes, also standalone bike and pedestrian projects also have a line item. Most of them are mapped, but if there are ones that aren't, there's still a line item for that in the MTP. So nonetheless, as I was saying, please reach out to us if you're unsure about a project's eligibility, and we're always happy to help clarify that. In almost every situation, we're going to be looking for a minimum of 20% match, so 80% federal share. And generally, we do not fund preliminary engineering and detailed design. We are looking to fund the right-of-way and construction phases of a project, but that P and DD phases, we're generally looking for locals to cover. We'll get into both of these a little bit more on the following couple of slides, but compliance with both the MORPC Complete Streets policy and the MORPC Smart Streets policy is required for all projects funded utilizing MORPC-Attributable funds. So that's something to keep in mind as you work through the project development process. And in that vein, you will have to follow ODOT's project development process to ensure compliance with all of the federal regulations if awarded funding through this program. So briefly, I'm going to give a little bit of background on the Smart Streets policy, and then I'm actually going to turn it over to Lauren to give more detail on the Complete Streets policy, since we just underwent another update on that Lauren was leading. So the Smart Streets policy, you can kind of see some of the background here on screen. It's really focused on ensuring that we are taking advantage of opportunities to expand digital infrastructure and other ITS technologies through our roadway projects. So it's a lot of very much in line with like a dig once type of policy. So generally just trying to be efficient with how we integrate new technologies into our system. With that, we'll spend a little bit more time than that on the Complete Streets policy.
All right, so quick refresher and update on the Complete Streets policy and what's required in terms of compliance with this policy. Any new funding commitment in this round of attributable funds is required to comply with the newest version of the Complete Streets policy. So that's the one that was just adopted a few weeks ago, is now available on our website. The link is in this presentation and will be posted online. It was first adopted in 2010, and we've revised it a couple of times since then to further prioritize our most vulnerable road users and emphasize safety in all the projects that we're funding. So there are 8 different sections within the policy. I won't go through all of them because that's too much information for today, but I wanted to specifically highlight section 4 and section 7, talk a little bit about the how this policy applies and where as you go through the funding cycle and project development process if awarded funds. And then Section 7, design, talks specifically about some of those state and federal regulations that you must follow in terms of design of your project. So talking about applicability of the Complete Streets policy, this essentially just spells out how the Complete Streets policy aligns with the attributable funds process. So step 1, we're here at the applicant workshop providing information to you all about the Complete Streets policy, but staff will also be available throughout the application process cycle to share any information, answer any questions you have about Complete Streets policy requirements and compliance. We will review your initial screening applications to ensure that they are complying with the policy as much as possible and provide any feedback necessary for changes to your final application. Step 3, as part of the final application, you're required to acknowledge that you have read the entire Complete Streets policy. I recommend reading through it. It's only 7 or 8 pages, I think. It's fairly short compared to all of the other things you're reviewing as part of this process. And then you're also required in your application to describe how your project is going to address the requirements in the Complete Streets policy. So there are some specific questions related to that. And then step 4, once MORPC has committed attributable funds to a project, you are required as a project sponsor or project manager to include MORPC staff in the project development process. So we'll talk through that here shortly as well. But as you go through the project development process, we'll be reviewing your documentation to ensure that you continue to comply with the Complete Streets policy. So this is generally what the project development process looks like. This is a requirement from ODOT, and this is just sort of a highlight of where MORPC kind of plugs into that process to review your documentation. So ideally, I guess describing this image a little bit, the major phases of the project development process are along the top, and then the notes highlighted by the arrow are an explanation of where MORPC plugs into this process. And then the descriptions below are kind of brief explanations of key steps in each phase. So within the planning phase, MORPC should be engaged in that initial scope development and kickoff meeting, initial site visit, to ensure that when all of that is written, the project concept is complying with the Complete Streets policy requirements. And then we get into the preliminary engineering phase where MORPC should receive stage 1 documents to continue to review construction, the design documentation to ensure policy requirements are being met. Continuing into environmental engineering phase, stage 2 and stage 3 documentation should all be submitted to MORPC for review, again, to ensure compliance with the Complete Streets policy. So skipping then to section 7 of the Complete Streets policy, this language is pretty much all new in this policy because it was updated to align with current federal regulations and guidance as it relates to design of roadways when using federal funding. So the kind of key things to point out here are that ODOT has developed specific statewide manuals that align with federal and state regulations so that you can refer to these manuals to figure out what you need to do or not do in your roadway design. So there's the Location and Design Manual, Volume 1, which specifically references roadway design criteria, and then the relatively new ODOT Multimodal Design Guide gets into more detail about how to design appropriate facilities for people walking and bicycling. So then additionally, the feds have come out with some recent information regarding design on the national highway system or off of the national highway system. So some of that language was included in the policy update. Essentially, if your project is on the national highway system, you have to follow those ODOT manuals or request approval from ODOT to use an approved, locally preferred roadway design guide. If your project is not on the national highway system, you do not need approval from ODOT to use this alternative guide. However, that guide must be locally adopted and also be recognized by Federal Highway as an eligible roadway guide. So I don't believe there are any communities in Central Ohio that currently meet these criteria. But we did want to include this information in here in case that did come to fruition at some point in the near future. But it's also good to reference a lot of the guidance documents that are included in here just to understand the different design options that you have when considering Complete Streets criteria. So there are a number of resources listed that are eligible design documents recognized by the Federal Highway Administration. And there are links and more information included in the policy document itself. So with that, if there are any specific questions regarding the Complete Streets policy, I recommend reviewing the policy language in detail. It's available on our website and includes those additional links to other information that can be helpful to review. We also have an active transportation plan for the MPO area that includes additional data, information, and resources as it relates to designing Complete Streets facilities. And then you're always welcome to reach out to me directly with questions. Pass it back to Tom.
So with that, we're going to move on to getting into more of how we classify projects and sort of how we operate the entire attributable funding program. A key feature of how we evaluate projects and then award projects is that we don't try to compare all projects to all other project types. Rather, we set defined activity categories and only score projects against other projects of a similar project type. So the defined activity categories that we have now are roadway improvements and operational changes. This is going to be any change to the operation of a roadway. So adding a lane, adding a turn lane, at this point, even a road diet is included in there. Signal upgrades would still be included there. Pretty much anything that's not a pure reconstruction project. Those pure reconstruction projects are what falls into that system preservation category. So that's just going to be replacing existing infrastructure, no capacity addition or reduction to be falling in the system preservation category. The public transit category, I feel like, is pretty self-explanatory. It's anything relating to transit, though there definitely becomes sometimes where there may be some gray areas there. And that's another reason why we do those screening applications, is to have those discussions and decide exactly what activity category is appropriate for a given application to compete in. So, and then finally, we have the bike and pedestrian category. This is for standalone bike and pedestrian infrastructure projects. So adding a path or bike lanes or sidewalks, but doing that without being part of a roadway project. Importantly, everything that Lauren was just talking about would lean itself to saying that all of the roadway projects, all of the system preservation projects, they should be looking at including bike and pedestrian facilities as well. So the bike and pedestrian category is truly just for the standalone projects, not alongside another one, but all of these roadway projects or bike ped projects should be providing that complete streets infrastructure. And then we have two more categories. These don't get treated exactly the same way. For those first four, we set funding target ranges. For these last two, they kind of exist outside of the target range, and it's only at the discretion of the AFC whether or not any money will be allocated. So the first of those is the interchange and freeway category. Pretty simple here. We generally want to use MORPC-attributable funds to benefit the regional transportation system and feel that those funds being allocated towards the freeway or interstate system tends to provide benefits far outside of our region more so than it does specifically impacting our region. Now, the AFC still has the discretion to allocate funds there, but we generally like to keep our funds out of ODOT sponsored projects. So that's why we have that one broken out, so that we don't have to commit any funds to those projects and we can try to focus more on just our regional roadways that are a regional responsibility to maintain. And then finally, we have the other category, because there are a number of eligible activity items under the CMAQ and STBG and TAP and CRP programs. And we're open to applications that could be eligible for any of those programs. Now, we don't get many of them. And that's why we break it out into its own category, because it wouldn't make sense to set a funding target range for that sort of catch-all category. But do know that if it is a federally eligible, if the project is federally eligible under any of those four programs that I just mentioned, it would still be eligible to apply for MORPC-attributable funds. So reach out to us with any questions regarding eligible project types, and much like with everything else, we're always going to be happy to assist you in figuring out if it's a good project to submit. Here's just a pretty simple flow chart, just kind of explaining how we go through the process of categorizing roadway projects. If traffic flow is not being affected, then we're probably going to find that as a preservation project. If it is, and it's primarily improving freeway operations, that's where we go interchange and freeway, and then everything else is what kind of falls into roadway capacity and operational changes. If you remember 2 cycles ago, we used to have 2 categories, major widenings and minor widenings. Those were combined 2 years ago into the roadway capacity and operational changes category, and it remains that same sort of combination of those 2 older categories today. So this is a pretty big part of why we or how we make this activity category situation work. We set funding target ranges for a % of our total program. At this time, for this round, it'll be our total program through state fiscal year 2031. Important to note, most of our funding through state fiscal year 2029 is already allocated to projects. So when we say we're looking for projects a little further out this round, most of the new funding is going to find itself in 2030 and 2031. You can see the percentages that we set. When we actually go to this next page here, the amount of new funding that we will be allocating to a given category incorporates the amount that we have in that category in current existing commitments. Last round, for those of you that were involved, you know we allocated a fairly historic amount of attributable funding, over $150 million in new commitments. And that kind of ate into our later reserves. So this round is going to be a little smaller than last time around, though still comparable to what it was prior to the BIL. You can see there we have over $230 million in current commitments through 2031 at this point. And that's why you see, as you get over to the range available for new projects there on the right, we are currently projecting that there will be no minimum in any of the 4 categories that we set target ranges for, but there will be maximums to still keep everything within there. Notably, we did a lot of bike ped this last time around. We did $53.4 million in new standalone bike ped commitments 2 years ago. And that's why we still have so many of those that are outstanding. And therefore, there isn't as much room for new commitments this round. So another thing to keep in mind with this number you see here at the bottom, available for new commitments, 72.4 million. Any requested increases from commitment updates will also have to come from that 72 million. So I do expect, just based on what we've been seeing with bids recently, that there will be some requested increases as we work through the commitment update process. So that'll probably eat into that total number. After we receive commitment updates later this summer, we reproduce this with a final actual projection of available funding based upon inclusion of those proposed changes to current commitments. So I'm going to go ahead and pause there, see if there's any questions regarding activity categories or projected available funding. Not seeing anything online or in the room, so I guess we can just go ahead and keep moving. All right. So moving on to actually getting into updates and new applications. To start, we're going to talk about commitment updates. So I know Nick mentioned that you already should have received an email from me. If you have to submit a commitment update, I do apologize. I am slightly behind. Those will come out tomorrow. But generally, you only need to submit a commitment update if the project that has a current commitment is submitting final plans after December 31st of this year, or if it's on schedule to award after June of 2025. So if it's going to fall into state fiscal year 26. And as noted there, I will be notifying you of all projects requiring updates. Commitment updates are the first due date in this process. That's going to be July 12th by 5 p.m. We've already pre-filled out most of the important dates and project scope, as well as the funding information from the last round of applications for these updates. So hopefully it's not too heavy of a lift for all of the project sponsors to get in there, make any changes, request those updates, and I'm hoping it should be a fairly easy process for you all. The big things that we are trying to get out of the commitment update process is going to be any changes to scope, any changes to the cost estimate, and then also any changes to the schedule. A couple other things that we require is another authorizing signature, just to show that the local jurisdiction is still supportive of the project. And additionally, for the same reason, we look for an updated resolution or any other form of legislation. This resolution or legislation does not have to be specifically authorizing the commitment update, but it needs to show sometime within the last year that there was some effort made by the governing body of your jurisdiction to advance the project. So this could be consultant authorization or any other piece of legislation that's sort of reaffirming the commitment to the project. If there isn't any of those, then we do ask for a specific resolution identifying the project. But either way, again, hopefully not too heavy of a lift, but those resolutions are actually not due on July 12th, though. We give extra time for the resolutions. October 29th is our drop dead date for getting updated resolutions. So want to provide some extra leeway there. We know a number of our jurisdictions have different processes for passing legislation. So you have a little extra time there, but want to make sure you get that on your radar nice and early. Again, kind of getting into that key update information that I was just talking about, the scope changes, the milestone changes, specifically anything that's moving more than 6 months we're interested in. And then any cost changes in excess of 10% is what we've always said. Now, I know I'm expecting quite a few in excess of 10% again. So, but nonetheless, that's always been sort of the threshold that we keep. So the online application form displays the current committed dollar amounts. That's going to be in a field that isn't editable from all of you. But then what we need you to do is enter a new updated estimate in current 2024 dollars. So not inflated dollars, but we need that to be in current 2024 dollars because the form itself will calculate inflation based off of the award state fiscal year that you input into the schedule tab. So very important. This will also apply to the new applications, but enter all of your cost estimates in 2024 dollars. And then if your inflated amount at the end there differs from that current committed amount by more or less than 10%, if it's less, we'll be happy. But if it's grown by more than 10%, there is going to be a field where we ask for some additional justification of why the cost increases have occurred. We then use these responses and convey them to the AFC when they're determining whether or not to make changes or increases to commitment updates. Very significant changes, especially very significant changes to scope, could require a new final application. So if that's the case, you would be notified and would have pretty much the same amount of time as everyone else to sort of take the commitment update, which is very similar to the information we're requesting in a screening application, and build out a new final application. All right. So now we get into the selection process for new projects. So the first due date there is those screening applications on July 19th. We'll then go through a period where staff reviews and provides feedback to applicants in advance of final applications being submitted on October 2nd. Throughout the fall, we then work through an evaluation process, coordination with the AFC for review and eventually their recommendation before moving for public involvement early next year, and then hopefully adoption of updated commitments and new funding commitments next March. All right. So let's talk about the purposes of the screening application. Firstly, we're generally going to be assessing the eligibility of a project here. The screening application is not asking nearly the number of questions that a final application does. The final application will require responses to all of our evaluation questions. We do not ask for that at the time of the screening application. And if a project is determined to be ineligible, we don't want applicants to have taken the time to fill out a full application if they weren't going to have a chance at being awarded. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, we do this to establish the activity category, which the project will be competing in. And then we also do it to sort of determine the demand of funding in a given round. If it appears to be a very competitive round, that's normally nice for applicants to know in the situation that maybe their application won't be as competitive. Again, an opportunity to save the time of filling out the full application if there isn't a good chance of funding. We also do it to sort of understand the stage of development which a project's already at. We expect that many of the projects that come to us are very early on and haven't started much development or pretty much still in that sort of conceptual like planning phase. But we also understand that some projects come to us already working through the project development process. So it's nice to get an idea of that at this time. And then we do it just to review the schedule and the costs, make sure that those seem generally reasonable with what we'd expect from the project development process and also what we'd expect from other similar project types. The info that we request in these screening applications, first we're going to be looking for that MTP project ID number. You know, as I mentioned earlier, projects need to be on the 24 to 2050 MTP to be eligible to apply for funding. So we ask that you take the time to, if it's individually listed, grab that ID number and put it in. If it's a line item, put that. If it's included via a line item, put that ID in. And again, if you have any questions when you're trying to determine what the correct MTP ID is, do reach out to us. We're always very happy to assist in that process. Then generally, we're going to be looking for information on the scope of the project. So location, limits, primary project type, and activity category. At this time, we also ask about the bike and pedestrian accommodations that are proposed with the project. Because as part of our screening application review, we're also going to take a look at it from that complete streets perspective that Lauren was talking about. And we're going to let an applicant know if we, from the very start, if we feel that a project is not in compliance with the complete streets policy, we want to have a discussion with the applicant about that so that maybe they could consider improved accommodations, or alternatively, we just can better understand why they believe the proposed accommodations are sufficient. And then we're looking for the project schedule and the cost and amount of funding requested. So fairly basic project focused information, not getting into really having to sell the project yet from an evaluation standpoint. Here you're going to see this is all the feedback that we provide on those screening applications. So I've already alluded to a lot of this, but we're going to highlight any eligibility issues. We're going to confirm the activity category that the project should compete in. And as I mentioned briefly, we're going to give some feedback on the general competitiveness of the application. And then what we're going to do is we're going to highlight all of the information that's needed on the final application. Not all activity categories require all questions in the evaluation section to be answered. That is broken down within the policies document, so you can access that at any time and look at it for yourself. But as part of our screening application feedback, we also take the time to highlight which questions you will need to be filling out for when you're working on a final application. Again, mentioned there that complete streets review and assistance, and then just other general guidance for the final application. So all of this, including the screening application, the commitment updates, and then eventually the final application, is going to take place in our online application form. Excuse me. The online application form went live like maybe 2 hours ago, so I'm assuming many of you haven't had a chance to look at it yet this cycle. For those of you familiar with it from past cycles, it looks pretty much the same. As you get in there and you create a new application, you're going to see that there are a number of different tabs. These are going to cover different project-related information, and then there's one tab to cover all of the evaluation-related information. That evaluation tab is what you don't need to be concerned with until after the screening application. If you start making edits at this point, they're not going to go away, so feel free. If you know you're definitely going to be submitting a final application, feel free to get started on them if you'd like, but by no means is that required by that July 19th screening deadline. So this is what the online application looks like. You're going to see down the left side here all of the different tabs. They each have some different questions in them. It all can feel a little daunting, but again, that's why we want you to know we will make ourselves available to sit down with anyone who needs to talk through different parts of the application or who has any questions. Want to make sure we can make this process easier for all of our applicants. So the first section, pretty simple. It's the applicant info section. You're going to be inputting contact information, how we're going to be reaching out to you. And that's also where you can attach that supporting resolution if you already have it. If not, though, again, not due till October 29th. Then we get into the reference info and dimensions section. This is going to have you identify the primary facility, the project limits, as well as the scope. So primary and secondary activities, as well as a project description. And then you're going to input which activity category you believe the project would be competing in out of those four, generally. We will provide feedback to confirm if that's in line with our definitions of the categories. Here's where you can also input your typical sections or plan views. There's a number of fields throughout the online application that allow for attachments. You can also input information regarding the width of lanes, shoulders, sidewalks, and paths, as well as details about bridges, railroad crossings, transit stops, and other project information. All right, planning and coordination section. Here you're going to talk about the origin of the project, what is motivating the project, and you're going to get into who the different stakeholders in the project are. Additionally, any adjacent projects or jurisdictions that you're working with on the project, and then also explaining the logical termini. We also include a couple of other scope elements on this page. That's going to be any impacts to utilities, as well as lighting, traffic calming components, and ITS components. Then we have a section devoted to the multimodal components of a project. So this is really what's getting at that complete streets compliance, but we're looking for applicants to provide an explanation of the existing bike, pedestrian, and transit components in the area, as well as the proposed components as part of the new project. There are a number of ways that you're able to describe which accommodations you will be providing. If you are not proposing to provide accommodations, you do need to be providing an explanation of why on this page in the multimodal section. Then we get to the cost estimate section. Here we're looking for an estimate prepared after June 30th of 2023. So generally nothing more than a year old. We're expecting a 20% match to the amount that you request. As mentioned earlier, PE is generally ineligible. You see there are some exceptions, namely for financial hardship or for particularly complex multi-jurisdictional projects. But if we were to fund PE, that PE amount will be deducted from a future phase. So you'd have to provide more match later on. We want you to know that you can utilize ODOT's preliminary cost estimating procedures to develop these cost estimates. And additionally, mention this again, we're looking for the costs in current 2024 dollars. We do discourage construction projects under 250,000. Might even go a little higher than that nowadays, but the cost of federalizing a project can be quite high. So we're looking generally for larger requests. And then again, that inflated number will populate after you fill out the schedule section because it pulls from the state fiscal year of the award date or the right-of-way authorization date. This is what the cost estimate section looks like in the application itself. There are two ways that you can input information. You can either input the fixed amounts, or you can click over there on the sort of top left of each box, and you can input as a percentage of costs. So there you input the total in 2024 dollars, and then break out the percentages, MORPC federal, as well as the local match to our federal, and then any other federal sources that are in the project or other non-federal sources. Fairly straightforward in that regard, but please, if you have any questions as you work through it, again, do not hesitate to reach out. Project schedule section. Here we have all the different project milestones you're used to seeing if you work through ODOT's PDP process. We are looking for some general guidelines for the schedule. We expect to see about 2 years of environmental, sort of up to that point of right-of-way authorization, another year scheduled in for detailed design, depending on the complexity of the project, 1 to up to 3 years for acquisition and utility relocation. And then if you have a planned file date in your schedule that is in between January and June, we will be looking at that as an award in the next state fiscal year. So just keep that in mind. All of that populates for construction projects. If you are applying for a non-construction project, You just get a box where you explain when the funding is needed and sort of the project schedule. But most of our applications are for construction asks. So navigating to the online form is slightly different than it was a couple of years ago. We made some updates to our website. But additionally, if you just Google MORPC-Attributable funding, it normally takes you to the site that you're looking for. But if you want to navigate to it from our homepage, come to morpc.org, click on programs, and then if you just come down to this search box and type in funding, it'll be the first page that shows up. Following that, when you first go to the 2022 our attributable funding online application, you're going to want to come over here to log in. And it's been 2 years. I know a lot of you already have credentials, but I'm sure many of you have forgotten your passwords. I have confirmed that that is working because I forgot mine as well. And then if you haven't registered for an account yet, you can come down here and register. I will tell you the registration won't immediately give you access. I still have to go in and assign you to the correct location. So hopefully I can stay on top of that pretty well over the summer. Shelby and I will both be looking at it. But if for some reason your registration hasn't been activated and it's been more than a business day, let us know and it must have slipped through the cracks. So hopefully we're right on top of that for you. Importantly, if you are a consultant working on an application, that is sort of a different user type. When you sign up for an account, or if you already have one, you need to let us know either when you sign up or via email which applications you're going to be working on. And then we actually assign you to the individual applications. For all other users who are part of a local jurisdiction, all users within that agency are able to see and edit all applications that agency has created. So this is what you'll be looking at when you log in. Only difference is that due date will actually say 7/19 right now. Changed that this morning. But here you're seeing an example. This is an account that was assigned to the city of Columbus as a test account. So you're going to see a listing of all 14 of their current commitments. And then as you create new projects, those new applications will populate down here. On the right, you'll see all the different users that are assigned to your organization. So, does anybody have any questions about the online application process? Or, yeah. Generally, no. We are looking for match by phase. So it would have to be 80-20 in the construction phase. The PE costs can still. Yeah, no, the answer is just no. I'm sorry. Sorry for those that couldn't hear the question there online. It was asked here in the room. Can PE costs that are locally funded count as match to a right-of-way or construction commitment? And the answer to that is no. When should you hear about the status of screening applications? That's a question we have online here. That once you submit screening applications, we're targeting by mid-August at the absolute latest that we will provide feedback on those screening applications. So it might take us a couple of weeks to get through all of them and provide that feedback, but we will still get it to you pretty much at least 6 weeks before the final application due date. All right. If there aren't any other questions, I'm going to actually turn it over to Shelby to give you this next section so that you don't have to keep hearing me talk.
All right, so I'm going to handle the evaluation and selection process section of this presentation. I'm sure you're all very curious how this all works. So just some basic information to start off. All of the questions and criteria that you'll provide responses for are grouped by MTP goal. I'll go over those on the next slide, but all of the criteria fall under a certain goal, so that gives us kind of objectives to look at to see whether or not the projects are adequately meeting the goals of our MTP, of our Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Some of the questions do not apply to certain categories. We will let you know, as Tom mentioned, in our feedback to your screening application, whether or not you need to respond to every question. But certain activity categories, you don't need to respond to all of the question and all the criteria. The online application mirrors what is in the appendix to our policies. So you can see a paper version or a PDF version of the application in the appendix, and it will have the same numbering as the online application. So here are our MTP goals. As Tom mentioned earlier, we just adopted our new MTP just a few weeks ago. We have 6 goals, and these represent our criteria areas for these applications for attributable funds. Just very briefly, the goals are economic opportunity, natural resources, energy, collaboration, health, safety, and welfare, and sustainable neighborhoods and quality of life. I'm not going to read all those out to you since we don't want to take too much more of your time here. But if you have any questions about those, please let us know. And you can also view them in more detail in the MTP. So for project scoring, this is just a kind of a brief overview of it, and I'll get into all of these a little bit in more detail here in the coming slides. But the evaluation criteria are grouped under, are different based on each activity category. And staff will perform initial scoring, and it will be finalized by our attributable funds committee, and and other committees will also provide feedback. There's qualitative and quantitative measures for our scoring, and they're scored up to 10 points for each of the 6 goals. So each of these 6 goals are scored relative to other applications in their categories. So there isn't like a fixed score that you're aiming for in every category. They're scored against one another. And a lot of them require a narrative for the criteria that you'll provide and we will evaluate. And each of the criteria have different levels of priority. So the highest priority is an A and the lowest priority is a C. And that all varies based on the activity category and the evaluation criteria itself. So you'll see all of these questions in the application and in our policies. It'll provide much more detail on what we're looking for each criteria. All of the goals are also weighted, and the weights are different for each activity category. And you also, just to make it very clear, if there's something that you're supposed to respond to, make sure you do. There is a penalty for not responding to required criteria. So this is just an example of what these look like in our policies. You'll see here the tables for economic opportunity and health, safety, and welfare. We make it clear whether or not MORPC is providing the data. I'll get into that a little bit later, but for some of these, we will provide the data for you. It also has a description of what we're looking for in this kind of middle category, or this middle column here, for each of the criteria. And then on the right side, you will see for each of the activity categories what the level of priority is for each criteria. If it's blank, it's something that does not require a response for that criteria. So again, A is the highest priority and C is the lowest, and that differs by the category. And then these are the different weights for each of our MTP goals and the activity categories, our project categories. You'll see that some of our MTP goals, we give a little bit more weight or a little bit less weight, depending on which of the activity categories it is. For example, we give more weight for bike and pedestrian projects in the sustainable neighborhoods category than we do for system preservation projects. And just a little bit more detail on some of these, some more detailed examples here for roadway capacity and operation changes. Here, these are two of the goals here. The kind of darker, more bold are the higher priority, and the sort of lighter colored ones are the lower priority criteria. Each of them, we're looking kind of for the same criteria depending on the goal or sorry, based on the category, but some of them have much higher weight and much lower weight. If it has an asterisk, again, that's something that MORPC will provide data for. For economic opportunity here, you'll see that other is a pretty high priority. And really what that is more of a narrative description of how the project will support economic opportunity. For health, safety, and welfare, it's a higher weight on that for roadway capacity. And a lot of that is emphasizing safety and how your project will improve safety and equity. So here's an example for system preservation. You'll see that the health, safety, and welfare here, there's a higher weight on this for system preservation than there is for roadway capacity. And the weights or the priorities for this are the same, but it's still the same criteria. And then for here's an example for bike and ped for sustainable neighborhoods, it has a fairly high weight of 30, and a lot of the criteria here is also narrative, describing the effects that the project will have on pedestrian systems, bikeways, transit, and again, you also have something here that we will provide data for. So here's the full list of everything that MORPC will provide data for. This will come after your screening applications. That's for the most part, that's when we're going to provide data. That's also when we'll know what you're looking for and what kind of the project is. You can expect that probably about mid-August. If there is anything that you're really looking for before that time, let us know. And if we are able to provide it before that, we will do so. So just reach out to us if you have any questions about that. And then as far as reviewing, staff will do the initial review and ranking of the projects. We do all the initial scoring and evaluation. And then we bring that to our AFC and they determine a recommendation for the program of commitments, and that includes commitment updates. So for existing commitments that we have, how much additional funding they will get if they've requested it, as well as new commitments. And it has to fit within those target categories and within our available funding. Then we have kind of a public involvement process where the public is able to provide feedback on the projects, our communities, our members are able to provide feedback. And then we also take this to all of our committees. So our Community Advisory Committee, Transportation Advisory Committee, and Transportation Policy Committee. Based on the feedback that we get from all of these sources, we might adjust our recommendations, but ultimately the Transportation Policy Committee will approve the final commitments, and that will happen in March of 25. Back to Tom.
All right, we're almost through our very long presentation. Apologies if you're falling asleep. All right. Final section we have to go over is the project development requirements. We got into this a little bit earlier, talking about following ODOT's PDP process, but at ODOT's request, we've added this additional section because they want to make sure we're reiterating it to everyone before we start awarding funds. To start, here are some just sort of schedule requirements and then some potential penalties that can come by. If a project is awarded funding, we will execute a partnering agreement with you to detail the expectations of the sort of the schedule of the project, the key milestone dates. That's generally going to be right away authorization, and for us, we'll normally set it at a final plan package being filed. So that's just going to be a fairly simple agreement between the sponsoring agency and MORPC. It's going to confirm the commitment amounts and then, yeah, add those agreed dates to achieve those milestones. Before the next round of funding, so that's going to be 2026, we are generally looking for new commitments to authorize a consultant on their project. So to take some sort of action to start moving it forward. If not, there is the possibility that you would have to reapply for funds, but we'll also accept any decent explanation for why there may be some delays in getting the project up and started. There are some penalties if there are significant delays to a given phase. If you're a year late, you're looking at a potential 5-point reduction on future new requests. And if you're 2 years late, there's the potential for the AFC to deem the applicant ineligible for new requests until those milestones have been met. Generally, our committees with this regard have been fairly lenient. I would expect the same, but we definitely still have these policies in place to ensure that there is an incentive for timely project delivery. Other requirements, we've said it multiple times, but you're going to have to follow the ODOT PDP and their project monitoring processes. So once if you're awarded funding, we are going to coordinate with ODOT to get that programmed within Ellis and their project tracking system. Those projects must be programmed before you can authorize a consultant. So there's a couple of steps here, but it really all kicks off with getting that coordination with ODOT, make sure you're ticking the boxes that they're concerned with, and get things off to a smooth start. When you're making formal submittals to ODOT, we do ask, as Lauren mentioned earlier, please copy us as well. From a complete streets monitoring perspective, it's very helpful to have access to any feasibility studies as well as any plan sets that are being submitted for review. And then, of course, sponsors are responsible for costs above the MORPC committed amount. Couple of tips for applications. Not every project is necessarily a great candidate for this program. You got to remember this program is all federal funding sources. So it comes with all those additional hoops you're going to have to jump through. So looking at NEPA and the Uniform Act and PDP, it's just there are going to be some additional steps. I know many of our jurisdictions are used to this and have moved along some federalized projects, and ODOT definitely will provide some assistance and guidance through the process, but it can definitely add some costs to the project development process. And then make sure that you're providing accurate, realistic schedule and cost data. So don't you don't feel the need to underestimate a project cost or make an unreasonably quick schedule. We're really looking for the most accurate data in your applications. And then provide good rationale and documentation for all of the different qualitative criteria. You know, there's a lot of these that we are just looking for you to provide a qualitative narrative response. So if you're able to incorporate good documentation or solid rationales there, it's going to make your application significantly more competitive. And then definitely consider how criteria and those different priorities, as well as the weights of different goals, kind of play against each other. And I'd say focus on the higher weighted items. And in the end, it's when you're putting together these applications, we suggest that you really focus on maximizing the strengths of a project before you worry about addressing every weakness. You know, every project is not going to be perfect. Every project's not going to provide benefits to every single category. So really focus on selling your project on what it's doing to be beneficial. This has been in here for a while, but if you've got very challenging projects that could be hard to deliver, federal funds might not be the best option. So consider applying for projects that are good candidates for federal funds, and if you have the flexibility, utilizing local funds for challenging ones. And then, of course, there's the ability to consider some consultant experience. If you're already working with a consultant, that's great. By no means are we saying you have to work with a consultant to complete these applications. We want you to feel that you're able to do them on your own. But of course, there's a number of folks around our region, both working at local jurisdictions and at different consulting agencies that have multiple rounds of experience with this application process. So with that, putting the application timeline back up there one more time. Going to reiterate the key dates. July 12th for commitment updates. Make sure you have those in. I will send additional notification to everyone tomorrow regarding which projects you currently need to provide a commitment update for. July 19th is that final due date for screening applications. As you're working on pulling that information together, please reach out to us with any questions. And following that, October 2nd is going to be that final application due date. So we don't have anything else to go over. And at this point, I'm happy to take any questions on any part of the process that anyone may have. And it's crickets. Okay. Well, in that situation, we'll make this entire recording available online. Again, there's both mine and Shelby's contact information. Reach out to both of us or one of us, whatever you want to do. We're both going to make ourselves available to assist you all in this process. Yeah, don't hesitate to reach out as you get to work. Appreciate everyone joining today. Wrap up early? I don't mind.